Anyway, the panel discussion is about the sustainability. How do you realize the opportunities, and why this topic? Basically, because sometimes when we discuss about sustainability a lot, we tend to think that it is within the four walls of a facility or of a company and stuff like that. So what are the opportunities? How can we have initiatives that can actually help to realize the necessary improvements in terms of sustainability program? So there will be a panel discussion. It will be led by Mr. Kendrick Ng. So Kendrick Ng is the Global Transportation Asia at Western Digital. So Kendrick, please give a quick background to Kendrick. Kendrick is a influential and strategic supply chain professional. Strategic, whoa. With more than 20 years of experience in high-tech manufacturing, Kendrick also believes that all companies can maximize your competitive advantage through an agile and optimized supply chain ecosystem. And he's also the chairman of our Shipper Council, as probably you would have known by now. All right, so along with Kendrick, so maybe you can introduce your team of, panelists. All right, so Kendrick, please.
Okay, so I have a team panel with us. We have Marcus, LeMaster from Schneider. We have Brad Marshall from Zuellig Pharma. We have Gwyneth from Bain, and Lisa from Sembcorp.
You can take one of these now. I can give back to me later. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just start with this hope for a creative American forward, right? Is that we inherit the earth not from our ancestors, but we are borrowing it for our children. So with that mindset, I'd like the speakers, the panelists, to introduce themselves and share a bit what shaped their passion for sustainability, and how is it important to them and the companies. Okay, starting on Lisa.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, Lei San here, Head of Carbon Management Solutions at Go Net Zero, which is the carbon management arm of Sembcorp. So before I go into what has shaped my passion, a bit about Sembcorp and Go Net Zero first. Sembcorp is an energy and urban solutions provider, one of the fastest growing pan-Asian renewable company. Over the last 2 years, we have quadrupled our solar, wind and energy storage capacity to over or nearly 11,000 megawatts in the last 2 years. And Go Net Zero is the carbon management arm, newly formed. We launched at COP27 last year, and it's really to try to solve some of the corporate problems of decarbonizing by being a one-stop renewable energy and carbon management solutions provider, looking at providing also renewable energy certificates, carbon credits, and really helping corporates on their journey in sustainability and decarbonization. Currently head of carbon management at Go Net Zero, but I've been with Sembcorp for quite a long time, and for the last 1-2 decades heading its sustainability function as well as investor relations and other functions. To give you a sense of how early on the company as well as me personally started looking at sustainability. Sembcorp actually issued our first sustainability report, GRI compliant, in 2009. So that's more than a decade ago. Although we now are very, very focused on this, but I think more than a decade ago, that was still early days. And for me, I think it's been based on a belief that success, whether personally or as a corporate, can't really just be based on the achievement of short-term objectives or financials alone, but it's all about building the foundation, looking at different aspects, environmental, social, governance, or looking at how we can affect lives and people, so that we can really think about creating and delivering value for shareholders, but also for stakeholders, the community and society.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gwyneth Fries, and I'm an expert senior manager at Bain & Company in the sustainability and responsibility practice. So I've been working in sustainability and sustainable logistics and food systems for over a decade. What I do now is work with a number of companies across a variety of industries to help them to decarbonize and also identify opportunities to lead in a low carbon economy of the future. I guess when I think about my passion for sustainability and where it really came from, a long time ago, early in my career, I used to advise governments on agro-export competitiveness. And if you've ever been involved in perishable food supply chains, you know there is just tons and tons of waste. This wasn't something I was super familiar with before I took on this role and really came to understand how those chains work. Moving on, what I realized is the level of waste and losses that I saw in those supply chains. The inefficiency is actually apparent in almost all of the industries that run our modern world. So it's there in construction, it's there in power generation, and also notably in transport and logistics for this panel. So that said, I guess that's an intro to me and my passion for sustainability. Pass to Marcus.
So, hello, everyone. My name is Marcus LeMaster. I head up the Global Logistics Sustainability function at Schneider Electric. We are a global manufacturer providing products, solutions, and services in energy management and industrial automation. Schneider's been on a journey in the sustainability space for close to 20 years now. In the past, we have been ranked, we're always amongst one of the top most sustainable companies in the world. It's part of the mission, the values inside our company, and permeates everything we do. And just from a commitment perspective, as I speak today, we have our commitments have been certified by SBTi. So we've laid these down. And as we look at this going forward, we made a commitment internally with our scope 1 and 2 emissions to be net zero ready by 2030, which eventually means to be decarbonized, pending the whole supply chain being decarbonized. To reduce our entire end-to-end value chain, scope 1, 2, and 3 by 25% by 2030, and then to be full net zero by 2050. So in alignment with the Paris Accords and the 1.5 degree targets. Personally, on my part, I don't have the same history in sustainability. I have a very diverse background, 30 plus years in the industry, various functions. Prior to my role in the sustainability, I was one of the leads in our global network modeling team. So did all the network design, optimization, footprint, flow design, this type of work about improving those. About 5 years ago, I got involved in overlaying sustainability metrics into this. So starting to measure the footprint of our, where our warehouses were, the transportation flows we had, and then just naturally led into this, understanding our products, our flows, and that piece. Since I've stepped into it now, how do we say, is before I moved into a new role, now I am quite passionate about it. There's a lot to learn. It's been very challenging, and I enjoy that piece of it. And it's ever evolving. So I say for me today is I'm actually contributing and making a difference aligned to the company values and such. And as I mentioned, learning and being challenged, I wish I could say on a daily basis, but more on an hourly basis, I think, around the topic.
Thanks, Marcus. Marcus didn't share that he and I have actually worked together historically, so I think perhaps his emerging passion may have rubbed off on me in that respect and becoming passionate about this subject. I think our organisation, I work for Zuellig Pharma, and Zuellig Pharma is one of Asia's largest healthcare services providers. So we represent more than 300 manufacturing clients of pharmaceutical products and medical devices, distributing through 80 warehouses, more than 80 warehouses across 13 markets in Asia. So we have a significant footprint of logistics and supply chain operations. I think our entry into the world of sustainability started with a little bit of a nudge from some of our clients who first began using one of the certification bodies, EcoVadis, as a part of their supplier qualification process. And so part of my responsibility at the time was being responsible for submitting much of the data that we were gathering across our business for EcoVadis. I think we realised that the mission was actually much larger than that, and I think we adopted a position based on a particular comment, which went something like businesses can't succeed in societies that are failing. It's a statement that we've used to energise our organisation, and we began the journey that talked to people, all our stakeholders, our employees, our board members, our customers, our clients, doctors, governments, medical experts, and we identified 22 material issues that were important, that we categorised into 4 specific pillars. And one of those pillars was ensuring the highest standards of integrity. And the most important material issue across those 22, when we looked at the scale and the rating from our stakeholders, was product quality and security. And as I'm the head of quality and HSSE, I therefore have quite a responsibility for one of those important material issues. And I think that helped drive my passion for sustainability. That, and I think a number of quite sometimes tense discussions with my 18-year-old daughter at the breakfast table when we were talking about these topics, and she was asking me what I was doing to support, creating a future for generations like hers and those that go beyond. And it really resonated with me in a way that I've picked up not just the material issue side, but I also have strong interest in a number of initiatives that we implement as a part of our company's sustainability program. And hopefully I'll talk a little bit about those later.
Yeah. Thanks all. As you know, this we are focusing on intra-logistics, and typically we are looking at a scope 1 and 2, what we can do in production, our warehouses that we own, whether it is shippers or as 3PL, eventually we will touch on that. So when we are talking about all the 4 walls, maybe Marcus, then Brett, share a bit on the challenges that you all have with your companies. Yeah.
Thanks, Kendrick. I think I'm going to go beyond the 4 walls and go into scope 3 a little bit, but I hope that's okay. I just want to touch on 4 areas when we think about challenges. And I'm not going to say they're huge challenges. It's just areas to watch. So the first one is really talking about the distribution center network out there. So in Schneider, okay, let me step back. Inside Schneider, our definition of a net zero site as we go forward is having removed all fossil fuels from operations, put in digital energy monitoring so we can be monitoring and assessing for efficiency purposes, and then having 100% certified renewable energy powering the place, whether it's from on-site generation or it's from power purchase agreements that are out there. The site needs to do that. Within Schneider, we have approximately 1,000 of our own sites that need to go through this. And our own sites, it's anything that's leased or owned that's actually managed by Schneider Electric. Inside the logistic portfolio, we have about 100 DCs globally. 50 of those are in-house, so scope 1 and 2. and about half of them, the other 50, would be outsourced, so 3PL, scope 3 in the emissions. So there's different challenges on the 3PL because, again, we have to work with partners and migrate. So I want to talk about the intralogistics inside. One of the things as we look at the DCs and the stuff in-house is understanding if it's not a greenfield site, which we have very few of those, and it's a brownfield site, is assessing where does that DC fit in the network. So as we run down this path to decarbonize these, where do we make the investment stuff? You know, is this a strategic DC? Is this a regional DC? Is it a local DC? If it's a local DC, there are service opportunities and there's a big cost to retrofit it. Is there opportunities to potentially outsource? You know, if it's something that's strategic that we need to stay in, you know, when is our lease up? So when is our lease up? How much investment would be required? How long are we going to stay there? So maybe we're in a prime location, but we expect to outgrow the building in 5 years. So all of these things go into the decision to decide how we proceed forward with the decarbonization decision around the DC. So what I would say is why we have a grand definition over the top of it. Each site is getting looked at on an individual basis to determine the best path forward. There's no one best way forward. Staying on intralogistics slightly and still inside the warehouse, I also want to mention packaging. We have a big sustainable packaging initiative internally. And again, looking at challenges specifically on logistics, it started out on a removal of all single-use plastics, going to recycled cardboard, and it evolved also into starting to look at primary packaging and the density and the type of packaging that we were using. One of the challenges, or a couple of challenges that have come from this, just to highlight, is one, if you start changing the size of the unit boxes and putting them into cartons onto pallets, you start changing the handling, the characteristics of it in the DC. So there's a potential downstream impact with that. And one that we've recently run into is as we look to say, you know, in our shipper cartons in secondary packaging, removing the airbags that are filler inside and replacing it with a paper recycled, it appears that in some cases it's actually heavier. And when you start talking about air freight, you have a savings associated with getting rid of the single-use plastic, but you've now added 3% more weight to air freight, which has a 100 magnitude increase on the impact of transport. So again, there's a lot of trade-offs that go into this. There's no right or wrong answer on it because there's different directions on it, but it is a challenge. And then two, quickly, I'm going to step into scope 3 real quick. Transport for Schneider is 100% outsourced, so it's all scope 3 for us. But again, coming back to the air freight piece, we were having some discussions earlier on sustainable aviation fuels and stuff. Inside Schneider Electric, between 45 and 50% of our CO2 footprint from transport is from air freight. So when we start looking at the efforts that we need to go on, how do we say there's these fuels out there, there's these options, the technologies and the fuels and stuff is going to be an evolutionary process. There's still a cost premium to deploy these, but over time these will come down, and what is the glide path there? But the real focus today is on optimization and efficiency. So are we shipping the optimal mode? Are our containers full? Are we minimizing empty miles? Are we working with carriers that are investing in more fuel efficient or lesser emission fleets? There's a big piece on that. And then the fourth one, which wasn't on my list that came out of the general discussion this morning, another challenge, and this isn't unique to this, I think it's to any functional area in a company, is sustainability plus functional expertise. And I think when we talk about the talent market out there today, we have a lot of people who are coming up who are very, very educated in sustainability. We have a lot of people who have 20, 30 years of functional expertise, say in logistics, but the ones who bring those together, who understand the intricacies and the calculations and approaches to sustainability with the functional, there's a gap in the talent market right now. I think it's addressable, but what I just want to sit and say is inside your organizations, as you look at this, you need to, while you can hire talent to come in and help with the sustainability strategy, you really need to get your key functional people on the ground, trained up and educated in this space to assist with, I'm not going to use the word transformation after this morning, these initiatives to move to a more carbon neutral world.
Brad, you want to add on to challenges that we face?
Marcus is highly extensive. Yeah, I mean, I think Marcus covered a lot of the similar areas that we worked on as well. I think the challenges for us to begin with, it was a little bit challenging for us to know exactly where to start with the process. And I think one of the things that we realised as part of looking through and trying to identify those material issues was how much we were actually already doing that we could capture beyond greenhouse gases and carbon emissions, more in the nurturing talent aspect, the making healthcare accessible aspect, and even some of the environmental areas as well as the areas of integrity. So we were already doing quite a bit of work, and it was really how do we pull together the initiatives that we had in place and the accreditations that we had in place, and then build on those to take those to the next level, which is what we've been able to do. So we have put in place all the necessary standards, the SBTI index, the carbon emissions protocol. We've been certified by EcoVadis, but it's really getting that process moving. I think one of the other significant challenges is just managing the data also as you work through this process. We have 80 distribution centres across 13 markets, and almost every one of them does things differently. And so being able over the last couple of years in particular to build our data set into one that is standardised, that we understand the metrics that are being used, that the calculations are correct, and that we're now, as a part of the verification process, we have an external party verifying the data that we're submitting for the different certifications. But that has been a very painful process. It continues to be a reasonably manual process, and we must move to digitisation of that as soon as possible. And I guess the third area, there is a fourth for me too, but there's a third area that has been interesting, and that is working with the SME partners that we have. The multinational suppliers and partners that we have, by and large, are very active in pursuing sustainability initiatives. But it's the smaller companies in the kind of middle range economic developed countries and the developing markets that are really having some challenges. And so we have a responsibility there to really be a part of their education process as well. And just to speak to the point that Marcus made, his last point on the topic of skill sets and competencies, which is also resonates very strongly with me. I think that a large amount of the work that we've achieved in sustainability so far has come top down. Board, executive management team, senior leadership team, people like myself who are pushing our teams to do it. The future is that our organisations across the lower levels of management are going to need to know how to drive the bus as well. And so that education process really needs to continue into the functional areas as Marcus suggests, and I feel very strongly about them.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing. What we see is there are a lot of companies that not sure how to start the sustainable journey, right? So maybe Gwyn and Lei San, can you share a bit of some of the solutions that some of our companies and case studies that we can learn from? Yeah, maybe Gwyn, you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So if you're just starting out on this journey, you are going to face first this data management challenge. What is my baseline and how does it compare to others out there? And so something I didn't mention earlier on, for 3 years, I was the global sustainability manager for Agility Logistics before the acquisition by DSV. And during that time, I was responsible for the emissions and environmental management data across thousands of warehouses in 40 different countries. So the good news is, when you start looking at warehousing data, it's very easy to get the utility statements, right? To figure out the biggest part of your emissions and your environmental impact will be your emissions, and it will be emissions, scope 2 emissions from electricity usage. So that starts out as fairly easy. You can just look at the utility bills, but you will need to work with people on the ground. Every single warehouse, every single office will need to have somebody that's accountable for collecting this information, at least in the short term, until you can build some kind of automated solution. And then in the medium to long term, integrate that into financial reporting. By the way, that needs to be done. But when you think about scope 1 emissions, so that's from your fleet, from the fuel that you use, that's where it gets really tricky. So as my fellow panelists here mentioned, it's really difficult to gather that data, and you need to build the skills on the ground. These need to be people, not just hiring somebody externally who's an expert in sustainability. They will have no idea how to work within your business and encourage people to do this. So it really is about, not just hiring external help, not expecting some sort of software system to solve all the problems, but really building those capabilities within. So that's what I would say about getting started. You're going to be starting with the data challenge, and it should be fairly easy with scope 2. So that's great for you, but you need to start putting in place these, building the capabilities internally. Another thing that I want to mention about just getting started. So we did a number of things at Agility, doing a green warehouse together with a customer, working collaboratively, installing solar panels with Sembcorp on the roofs of our warehouses in Singapore, implementing packaging measures. So it's really difficult to get people to do things differently. So, and particularly when they perceive that sustainability necessarily means additional costs. So the one important message, which I think we would all agree with, is that sustainability doesn't have to be expensive. In fact, when you look at the built environment, generally, it's 50% of emissions from the built environment could be abated with technologies that are out there, all of which have a positive return on investment. So just keep that in mind. A lot of what we're doing, the barrier is not cost. The barrier is not technology. The barrier is our perception and how hard it is to actually change. Thanks.
Thanks. I think I'll focus a little bit on how to get started, and as Gwyneth said, on scope 2. So the International Renewable Energy Agency said that potentially 75% of the emission reduction that we need to reach a 1.5 degree world could be met by the use of renewables and electrification with renewables. And so this is something that is okay, I hesitate to say low-hanging fruit, but one thing we can look at in intralogistics and facilities is, as I said, your scope 2. How can you transition to lower emission or renewables? And as a corporate, there are various levers that you can have. You can look at on-site. Is it possible for you to have on-site renewable generation?
is it possible for me to get green PPAs according to the best practice and guidelines and standards? Or should we be looking at renewable energy certificates, etc.? So I think if you look at what Sembcorp has done, and we've served different customers, including in the logistics field like DHL, YCH, Agility, or DSV, and we've done a few things. One is to, of course, develop with them and deploy renewable on-site renewable energy. I'll talk a bit more about that in a while. Secondly, if renewable energy certificates to curate that and provide that. And thirdly, and very importantly, we go back to the need for the data collection and the need for transparent disclosure and assurance that we can give all our stakeholders of the claims we make. So Go Net Zero has a digital platform. On it, if you have renewable energy assets, we have something called Solar OS, which is an operating system that helps you track the performance of your solar generation. If you have used environmental attributes like renewable energy certificates or carbon credits, we help you easily buy them, retire them, manage your portfolio. And I think that as you look at these levers, I think the key thing about getting started, I would say, is to start. And there's no shame in going for the low-hanging fruit. You don't have to know every part of your roadmap till 2030, 2050, and have full confidence in that before you start. So something like looking at renewable energy, whether you can have on-site installation. So taking up the example of Agility or DSV, we actually signed a 25-year power purchase agreement and got solar panels installed. This actually involved no upfront costs, to Gwyneth's point, for the corporate. No upfront costs. Sembcorp at that time, we signed a long-term contract with us. We come up with the OPEX, the CAPEX. You do have to have a long-term commitment. And it resulted in savings of, shall we say, over 40% in terms of electricity consumption bills. So I think costs, technology, the solutions are out there. We don't have to solve problems for the next 30 years, but we need to start somewhere. And Scope 2 and going renewables is a good way to start. I don't know whether Gwyneth, we wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that when we were negotiating to do the solar panels, it almost seemed like a scam. The deal was so good, right? You know, upfront costs. It wasn't a scam. So, I mean, people were resistant because they'd never seen a contract that looked so good before, and they just couldn't believe it because this was something totally new that they had never done. So there was a lot of skepticism and resistance at first, but once we had those panels installed, everyone was so proud and they were so happy. And then everybody else around the region said, like, hey, can I get solar panels? How is this done? And then it became, you know, for our Singapore-based leadership, it was a point of pride for them. And it was something that they could then export, you know, this new knowledge of how we got this done and what are the different considerations and all that they could then share with other leadership teams in the region and beyond. So very much a success story and something that would be easy for you to replicate in your own operations and a great place to start.
I just want to jump in here. I realize that everybody's at different places in the journey. And we've been throwing around Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 wildly up here. Not sure if anyone's wondering, but Scope 1 is essentially the emissions generated from your direct operations. So your trucks, your factories, your distribution centers. Scope 2 is the emissions associated with the energy you use in your direct emissions. So whether it's oil, gas, electricity, whatever, the emissions associated. And Scope 3 is everything else. So it's the emissions associated with any products or services that you buy from suppliers, as well as the emissions from the products that you sell to your customers downstream, upstream. So I just want to clarify that because we've been throwing Scope 1, 2, and 3 around wildly. So that's what it means.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I mean, like what Lei San say, identify, internalize some of the things that we could do for your companies. And one of the things we often face, right, of course, is increasing costs. Gwyneth said something like, there's cost as a barrier. It's really sometimes not. So maybe Brett and Marcus, share a bit on, how do you get the stakeholder buy-in, to let them start something?
Yeah, I think as an example, Marcus touched on the topic of packaging. So a couple of aspects there. One, we're one of the largest cold chain distributors in Asia. Our footprint of cold chain infrastructure is significant. And our deliveries of vaccines and other cold chain products to hospitals, pharmacies, drugstores, etc. The traditional method was highly dependent on styrofoam boxes and ice gels. And the technologies of packaging have evolved to a point where we could move away from styrofoam and ice to vacuum insulated panels and phase change materials that have the capability of maintaining temperatures at the same place. So in the case of normally vaccines, you ship between 2 and 8 degrees. So the phase change material for a panel is usually at 4 degrees. If you freeze it at -20 for 2 days and then condition it, it will keep at 4 degrees for between 96 and 120 hours. So that's a significant improvement in capability. It is expensive to invest in, and we had to make a business case for the investment in that packaging, which we did. Our business case was originally based on a 4-year life. With our original units, we are achieving 6+ years. So our return on investment has been quite strong, and the rate of reusability has been significant. So we've reduced our styrofoam box consumption by 360,000 units a year. And styro boxes are also expensive at times for the pharma grade product, but also in terms of reducing waste due to temperature excursions, both up and down outside the required temperature range. In the case of vaccines, 2 to 8, have almost gone to zero with the use of this packaging. And so that's significant. It's a significant improvement in the cost of operations for us, a significant improvement in terms of our reliability and our reputation for reliability, and a significant improvement in that it's reducing product waste, product loss, and improving the availability of these medicines for patients.
Marcus?
Yeah, I think just a couple things on my side. I'll take a slightly different view. I don't know if to start with the carrot or the stick here yet, but I'll start with the carrot on it. What was the carrot? Anyways, okay. Okay. I guess one of the challenges on thinking of the buy-in from a Schneider perspective is we've been building this corporate culture for 15 years, inside out. The products that we make, as I mentioned, is around energy management. So essentially, we make all the stuff that you need in order to electrify. So we have actually built a journey where our value proposition, the products and solutions that we do, are all about assisting in electrification, which is the first step to a decarbonization approach. But from a carrot perspective, I'm just going to say the obvious ones that everybody hears. It's the customers are demanding it. It's doing the right thing for the environment, being a good corporate citizen, looking for our future generation. But I do want to highlight the stick part of it. It's around regulation and reporting and regulatory side of things and legal side of things. We don't see it as much in Asia yet, but in the EU, even if you look at California and the US, so there's some very, very strict requirements coming down around emissions. Yes, there are the ones on the vehicles and the stuff on decarbonizing there, But there are things coming down in the EU right now about what packaging you are allowed to use on your product. And if you're not going to have it, it will be illegal to sell the product in that market. So I hate to throw that out, but it's absolutely critical on this one. You could find yourselves banned from markets if you are not addressing and paying attention to these regulatory side of things. The other is just from a financial side case, and I'm assuming that the CFO and the corporate reporting people on your side are aware of it. In the EU and like the SEC in the US and stuff, they are actually moving towards making sustainability reporting mandatory in corporate financial reporting every year. So I just want to bring this out. It's not really, how do we say, it's the ultimate way to get buy-in. It's not the best way to get buy-in of the masses, but I just wanted to highlight that one on top of what others have said on the topic.
Okay, thanks. Let's welcome some questions from the floor. Yeah. You. And do you all have any questions for the panel? It's on? Yes. Thanks.
Hello. I have a question for Marcus. Marcus, you mentioned about talent gap. Consultants coming out trained in sustainability from having certifications and schools, etc. On the other side, you have people who are there in the industry 20 years, 30 years, who are very strong in functions but don't understand the sustainability. How do you think companies can address this problem? What is it, 2 or 3 things they can do to bridge that gap?
I think from the perspective in Schneider, there's really a too-long approach. You do need the experts coming in. I'm not going to say they're consultants. They're hired experts on sustainability. We are building people inside the company who know this and pairing them with people like me who come from a functional background at that higher level to get the strategies right, get the plans right. But there's also a big piece is we're also developing the competency plans of what's required, the engagement plans with the folks on the ground, and pushing out training. So as part of it is, as part of your training this year, as part of the competencies in your role, you must achieve a certain level of novice, basic, advanced with regards to sustainability and building the training programs. So we're taking very much a training program approach to it. And there was one other thing that we're doing as well, but I just escaped it. But that's a big piece of it. Oh, I was going to mention, we've also started, especially with the younger generations, we have a huge amount of enthusiasm about this topic in the company. And what we've done is we've really harnessed this in supply chain. We've got what's called sustainability ambassadors. So these people are people who have full-time jobs, but are absolutely interested in sustainability. And we've got them into a formal group where they can actually work for certification levels and such. And they're, as part of their job, either getting engaged in global programs or they're driving local things like the biodiversity program at a specific site. So again, it's finding the people who have the passion in the organization, setting the structure up around it, and then enabling them and allowing them to bring that forward. Part of that, again, is we're training it up to bring them, sit and say it's a chance for them to trial this, for them to see it in the organization, and then also potentially build a career that's more sustainability aligned inside the organization. So really it's the training and the competency development piece.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Just one comment on that. Just in the last month, we've also initiated together with Republic Polytechnic, who have a green supply chain course, and so we ran a pilot program for that course, 15 people across the 13 markets for the first time, as a first step towards building stronger understanding and stronger engagement. But I think the universities are a great asset to be able to build that knowledge and understanding further and do so at a reasonable price also.
Any more questions from the floor? Okay, there.
Matthew Geller from Copenhagen. Neste last week they opened up the largest biofuel plant in Asia, and it's great that it is in Singapore. But I wanted to ask, where do you see biofuels?
Actually, I'll take a first shot from a corporate side of it, and then I'll let Gwyneth talk a bit about from our side, one of the challenges with biofuels is it does fit in our strategy. We are looking at them, especially in things like aviation, sustainable aviation fuels are realistically, other than not flying, is really the only options today. But there is another challenge just to be aware of, is the greenhouse gas protocol today does not allow book and claim type programs to be claimed in your corporate accounting side of things. And our SBTI certifications and stuff follow that. So today we're looking at them. They are a plan that, they are a path that we're going to need to go down to, but we have a challenge associated with the fact that they're not recognized in accounting for corporate accounting purposes. So it's just something it's evolving. There's an open session going on right now. We're hopeful and we think that we'll probably get a positive related to those, but the protocols don't allow it in the accounting today.
Yeah, in terms of as a decarbonization lever or part of decarbonizing the aviation industry, there's definitely a role for SAF, right? There has to be a role for SAF. The issue that we face is some SAF is built using not necessarily waste products, which is not sustainable at all. Not at all. So we need to eliminate all options where SAF is produced using not waste. And then in order to get this truly sustainable aviation fuel, we need to be gathering wasted cooking oil from restaurants all over the world. And you could just imagine the supply chain for doing that. And even, as I mentioned earlier, getting people to do things differently. Well, I was having a conversation with someone outside, just like getting people to actually collect their wasted cooking oil and give it to you, not to mention just building up the supply chain for that. So there's just an enormous supply chain challenge. Now, if we're really committed to net zero, we really want this to happen, and we're prepared to pay for it, that is exactly what needs to be done, and there's definitely a place for it. But as it stands now, there just isn't the type of support and demand for it for SAF to achieve the scale that it would need to achieve in order to become for it to realize its potential as a decarbonization solution.
Okay, our time is up. Can you hear me? Our time is up, so I'll end the session with what Lei San just mentioned. Right, start small, and allow me to quote Robert Swan, who is a famous explorer who has touched both North Pole and South Pole. That he says the biggest threat to our planet is the belief that somebody else will save it. Right, so it starts with us. Okay, so let's take it away. And back to you, Lawrence. Or is it just break?
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for the panelists, please. Thank you.